I hate everyone's touch except my hot doctor. Trigger warning. This story contains descriptions of child abuse and childhood trauma that may be disturbing or triggering for some readers. Please proceed with caution. No! The word escaped my mouth before I knew it. I didn't realize how hard I was breathing until my senior asked me to calm down. This was my third date with someone from work, and it was just as disastrous as the last two. The same old feelings of dread and anxiety washed over me as soon as the person even tried to come close to, no matter how discreetly. I could see the frustration in his eyes. After all, he had just tried to hug me. But I couldn't care less as my head was once again crowded with similar questions. Why was I like this? Why couldn't I just relax and enjoy myself? I apologized hastily, making some excuse about feeling unwell, and left the restaurant as quickly as I could without causing another scene. As I walked home, my thoughts spiraled into the same dark place they always did after a failed date. Maybe I was broken beyond repair. Maybe I would never be able to have a normal relationship. The memories of my childhood came flooding back as they always did in moments like this. The image of me returning from a favorite restaurant with my mother, father, and elder sister flashed before my eyes. And so did the image of us happily chatting and laughing before the dreaded bright light flashed in front of my eyes. The memory of me stuck in the car surrounded by rubble, crying for everyone, yet no one was replying. To date, I do not know who picked me up or what happened. The next thing I remember was that I was in the house of my uncle who always smelled funny and never got to see my parents or my sister ever again. No, don't go there, Alex, I chant to myself, as if this time would be any different. I knew once this memory had been tapped, it would continue till the end. How old was I? 8 years old, probably? When my uncle hit me the first time because I wouldn't stop crying for my parents, and then maybe I was 9 when my uncle smelled very bad and kicked me in the stomach just because I got in his way. I think I was around 11 when my uncle used my back as an ashtray for the first time, and it was finally at the age of 13, I guess, when for the first time my uncle drunkenly forced himself on me. I was still lost in these thoughts when I reached my apartment. I slumped onto the couch, feeling the weight of my past pressing down on me. It wasn't fair. I wanted to move on, to be able to enjoy the things that other people took for granted, but it seemed like no matter how hard I tried, I was always brought back to the same place, alone and scared. A few days later, luck was really not going in my favor. I thought to myself as I found myself in the local clinic clutching my lower back in pain. I had taken a nasty fall while trying to fix a leak in my roof, and the pain was too much to ignore. The receptionist told me that the new doctor in town, Jamie, would see me shortly. I tried not to think much of it at the time, but I couldn't help but dread meeting the new doctor. Mrs. Smith, the old doctor in town, had known me since I was a kid, and very well understood that I didn't like to be touched. Now, I have to explain myself to a new doctor all over again. I thought while wondering how the new doctor would be. About half an hour later. Fuck. It was all that came out of my mind when Dr. Jamie walked into the examination room. The new doctor looked too, attractive to be a doctor. I'm not judging him by his looks. I mean, I was a little, but God, even I don't know what I was thinking. He was hot and looked confident, yet something about him felt very gentle, which put me at ease despite myself. He introduced himself with a warm smile and asked me to describe what had happened. I grew more and more embarrassed as I recounted my clumsy fall, but he listened attentively, making notes on his clipboard. "All right, Alex, let's take a look at your back," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'll need you to remove your shirt and lie face down on the examination table." "Remove my what?" "Your shirt, please. I'll need to look at your wound in order to treat it." Of course," I stammered. My heart started to race. Now my heart raced for two entirely different reasons. First, naturally, the fact that I hated being touched, especially my back. Second, well, I don't know second, but for some reason the doctor made my heart race at the speed of a racing car. With trembling hands, I did as he asked, bracing myself for the worst. However, before he could treat me, I jerked back up. The doctor was shocked. "You'll only use the metallic instruments to touch the wound, right?" I asked in a small voice. "I may look young, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. And to answer your question, yes, Alex, I'll only use the instruments and a couple of cotton swabs to touch your wounds. Now, please, lie back down." Shit, I made him mad at me. Jamie carefully examined my back. his cotton swab probing carefully to assess the damage. I flinched at first, but was somewhat relieved. However, the next moment, the side of his hand grazed my bare back, and I felt a shiver throughout my body. It was strange, but his touch didn't feel as bad as I expected. In fact, it felt almost soothing. I couldn't believe it. How could this be? "Does this hurt?" Jamie asked as he continued to tend to my wound. I shook my head, too shocked to speak. The sensation of his hand on my bare skin was different. It didn't send me into a panic like people's touches usually did. Instead, it felt oddly comforting. Jamie continued his examination, explaining what he was doing in a calm, reassuring manner. I found myself relaxing slightly, the tension in my body easing for the first time in as long as I could remember. When he finished, he helped me sit up and gave me a prescription for pain medication, along with some exercises to help with my recovery. "Take it easy for the next few days, and if the pain doesn't improve, come back and see me," he said with a kind smile. "And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions." I thanked him and left the clinic, my mind racing with what just happened. For the first time in years, someone's touch hadn't felt like a violation. It had felt safe. Could this mean something? Could Jamie be different from everyone else? About 2 weeks later, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that appointment since. The memory of Jamie's touch lingered in my mind, a small glimmer of hope in the darkness. I found myself looking for excuses to visit the clinic just to see him again. Each time I did, he greeted me with the same warm smile, and each time, I felt a little more at ease. I think I must have visited him about 10 times in the past 2 weeks. Yet, here I was again, but today was different. I had finally worked up the courage to ask him out for coffee. My heart was pounding in my chest as I waited for his response, but his eyes lit up with genuine pleasure. "I'd love to," he said, his smile widening. "How about the afternoon?" As we sat in the cafe during his break, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Jamie was easy to talk to, and he didn't push me to talk about things I wasn't ready to share. We talked about everything and nothing, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could have a normal relationship. I was still curious about what had happened and intrigued by Jamie, but it didn't matter much now. Sitting here with him, I realized I was falling for him. Hard. It wasn't just his looks, though he was undeniably attractive. It was the way he listened, the way he genuinely cared about his patients, the way he made me feel safe. And it wasn't just one-sided. Jamie seemed to be falling for me too. He started making little comments about how he enjoyed our conversations and how he looked forward to seeing me. A month later, we began spending more time together outside the clinic. Coffee turned to lunch, lunch turned into dinner, and before we knew it, we were dating. It felt surreal. For the first time in my life, I was in a relationship that didn't terrify me. Jamie understood my boundaries and never pushed me to do anything I wasn't comfortable with. But then, one evening, everything changed. We were at his apartment watching a movie. I was leaning against him, my head resting on his shoulder. It felt nice, comfortable. As the movie ended, Jamie turned to me, his eyes soft and filled with affection. He leaned in to kiss me and I didn't pull away. His lips were gentle, his touch tender. But then, his hands moved to my back and suddenly I was a child again, trapped in my uncle's grasp. Panic surged through me and I flinched violently, pulling away from Jamie's touch. The look of hurt and confusion on his face broke my heart. "What's wrong, Alex?" he said, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't find the words to explain. How could I tell him about the nightmares, the flashbacks, the deep-seated fear that had controlled my life for so long? I shook my head, trying to push the memories away. "Nothing. It's nothing," I mumbled. But Jamie wasn't convinced. "Alex, talk to me," he said, reaching out for my hand. I pulled away, unable to bear the thought of his touch. "Just drop it, Jamie," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. His eyes widened in surprise, and I could see the hurt there, mingling with confusion. "Why won't you let me in?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I thought we were building something together, but you keep pushing me away." "I'm not pushing you away," I insisted, but even to my own ears, the words sounded hollow. Jamie's face hardened and he stood up, pacing the room. "This isn't fair, Alex," he said, his voice rising. "I care about you, but I can't keep doing this if you won't even talk to me. I need to understand what's going on." "I can't," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I just can't." Jamie stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "Why not? Why can't you trust me?" The argument escalated quickly after that. We were both shouting, saying things we didn't mean. Jamie accused me of not caring about him or trusting him enough to let him in. I lashed out, telling him he didn't understand, that he couldn't possibly know what it was like to be me. The fight reached a boiling point, and with a loud thud, Jamie stormed off, slamming the door behind him. As the silence settled over the apartment, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I had pushed away the one person who had made me feel safe, the one person who had shown me that not all touch was to be feared. I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands, and let the tears come. I wanted to follow him right at that moment. However, my phone buzzed and it showed me something that stopped me in my tracks. It was a message from my uncle. He was going to be in town soon and will be staying with me for a couple of days. The fear returned, and I couldn't help but want to get back into bed and hide as I did in my childhood. 3 weeks later. These past days were some of the darkest I had experienced in a long time. Not only Jamie and I didn't speak, I was living with my uncle. Thankfully, so far, he had been keeping to himself, was mostly out doing God knows what, and rarely disturbed me. It's not like I don't hate him. I hate him, but it's equally true that I'm scared of him still. This is the reason I haven't been able to cut him off now. Sure, I tell myself it's just because he is the only family I have left, or that no matter how badly he treated me, he took me in when I had no one left. But deep down, I have always known that I am still the little boy who cower in his sight. It was a tough time, but it made me crave Jamie's touch more than ever. All the distance made me realize that maybe if I opened up to him and we took it slow, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to accept his touch. And to be honest, the idea didn't feel so bad in front of the distance between us. So, as I sat alone in my apartment, I picked up my phone and called him. "Jamie, it's Alex," I said, when he answered. My voice was shaky, but I pushed on. "I'm sorry, I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" There was a long pause, and I held my breath, hoping against hope that he would agree. Finally, he sighed. "Okay, Alex, let's talk." As I hung up, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was going to be a long, difficult journey, but for the time, I was ready to take the first step. With Jamie by my side, maybe I could finally start to heal. Later that evening, we had decided to meet the next day, but I couldn't wait any longer, so I went to his clinic to visit him. I walked into his clinic pretending to be sick. My heart was pounding in my chest as I sat in the waiting room. When I finally saw him, all my nerves seemed to evaporate. "Hey, Alex," Jamie greeted me with that warm smile of his. "What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, I said, "There's something I wanted to talk to you about." I decided to lay it all out. I told him everything. My feelings for him, my past, the abuse, the trauma. I confessed how much he meant to me and how he made me feel safe. Jamie listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. When I was done, he looked so happy. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he rushed over and hugged me tightly. His embrace was firm yet gentle, like he was holding me together. Before I knew it, Jamie was pushing me down onto the patient's bed. Panic surged within me, but then I looked into his eyes. They were so reassuring, full of warmth and kindness, that I felt my fears slowly melting away. His gaze held mine, grounding me, pulling me back to the present moment. Jamie moved slowly, his touch incredibly gentle. He placed a hand on my arm first, a light, comforting weight. The warmth of his skin seeped through my shirt, and instead of recoiling, I found myself leaning into it. "Alex," he murmured, his voice low and soothing, "you're safe with me." As he leaned over me, his face close to mine, I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His breath was warm against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. Jamie's eyes never left mine, and I could see the concern and desire etched into his features. "I want to help you, Alex," Jamie continued, his voice husky, "but you need to trust me. Can you do that?" I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I'm trying." "I know you are, and you're doing great," he encouraged, his lips curving into a tender smile. "Just keep breathing." With every touch, he was careful to check my reaction. His eyes never left mine, and I could see him gauging my comfort level, adjusting his approach as needed. He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, then another to my temple. His lips were soft, his kisses feather light, sending sparks of heat through me. "We'll take this one step at a time," he promised, his lips ghosting over my skin. "Together." In that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. Jamie was here with me, willing to help me heal, to face my fears, and with each slow and gentle kiss he left on me, I knew I was safer than I had ever been. I don't remember how many times Jamie guided me and helped me overcome my fear in his clinic before we actually went back to his place, where he helped me again and again till I was scared no more. The next morning, I woke up in Jamie's apartment feeling giddy and light. It was my first time experiencing this kind of intimacy, and it felt incredible. I lay there staring at the ceiling, a goofy smile on my face. I was seriously in love with my doctor. Jamie was in the shower, and I could hear the water running. I stretched out feeling content and happy, but then his phone chimed. Out of habit, I glanced at the screen and saw a message preview. "When will you be free? Your parents want us both to be present to meet the wedding planner," the message read. It was from a girl. My heart sank. All those horrible thoughts started flooding my mind. I tried to dismiss them, telling myself that there had been an explanation, but the doubt and fear were too strong. I didn't even wait for him to come out of the shower and started banging on the door. He hadn't even cleaned himself properly. I could still see the foam stuck to his body in places as he opened the door, half covered in foam and half in a towel. I showed him the message, my voice shaking as I asked him what it meant. The look on his face confirmed my worst fears. I didn't even wait for him to answer. I couldn't believe it. I felt so betrayed. I accused him of playing with my feelings, of leading me on. The hurt and anger were overwhelming. Before he could even say something, I ran out of his apartment, tears streaming down my face, leaving him behind screaming my name. About an hour later, I had just reached home and went straight for the sofa and cried to my heart's content. How could that jerk do this to me? After I let him in, I told him my worst fears and he saw me all vulnerable. I cried and cried and cried to my heart's content. However, in my pain, I had forgotten that my uncle was back living with me, and little did I know he had just had the content fill of his favorite drink. As I was crying, I didn't notice when he sneaked up behind me and asked me whether I remembered how I used to please him. Before I knew it, my uncle was forcing himself on me. All at once, the trauma returned and I was frozen. Thankfully, someone came just in time and threw my uncle off me. It was Jamie. He came just in time, saved me, and started beating my uncle. And that is when I remembered that I had forgetfully left the door open when I came back home. "Jamie, what are you doing here?" my uncle asked. However, he had already received 2 more punches before Jamie could stop himself and focus on him. He was equally shocked. "Uncle? You? Here? Don't tell me you are..." Jamie stammered. I barely understood any of it, yet I asked if they knew each other. "Knew each other?" Uncle spat. "This young man is my supposed son-in-law." However, Jamie cut in between saying, "If you didn't leave right this moment, this son-in-law wouldn't mind teaching you another lesson," and ran towards him, but my already scared uncle ran out of the house. It took Jamie a few moments before he turned his attention to me. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Thank you, but I'm okay now. You can leave." But Jamie didn't leave. He covered me with his coat and sat beside me on the couch, his presence calming despite everything. He started explaining, his voice steady but full of remorse. "I'm so sorry, Alex," Jamie began, his voice heavy with regret. "I had no idea about her being your uncle's daughter. It's like a nightmare finding out like this." Apparently, he had no idea that the girl his family had chosen for him was my uncle's daughter. He explained to me that he belonged to a conventional family and they would never be able to accept him being gay. He had been stalling his wedding for quite a few years, but this time when he went to visit them, around the same time we had our first fight, he learned that his family had already fixed his marriage with a girl and the engagement ceremony was held within a week. Since he had not hoped to see me again, he had no hope nor will to go against his family. He didn't even know the girl or talk much to her, who now, it seems, is my uncle's daughter. Honestly, I didn't even know my uncle had a daughter. I did hear something about him being divorced, though, but never cared enough to ask. It was a cruel twist of fate, he said. However, when I came to see him again, he wanted to tell me the truth, but everything happened so suddenly that he just couldn't, and before he could, I found it on my own. I stared down at my hands, clenched in my lap, but he took my hands in his. "I never meant to hurt you," Jamie continued, desperation evident in his voice. "Please believe me, Alex. I love you. I would do anything to make this right, even if it means breaking off the engagement and cutting ties with my family." His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. I looked up at him, searching his eyes for any hint of deceit. Jamie's gaze was unwavering, his expression pleading for forgiveness. I pulled his collar and hugged him. "You big dummy, I'll forgive you on 2 conditions. Anything," he said hopefully. "First, you'll break off with the girl. And second, no more secrets. I promise." And with this, he kissed me passionately. The next day, as discussed, Jamie left for his family's house to confront his family. I stayed behind, pacing the apartment as I wrestled with my thoughts. Memories of my uncle's abuse resurfaced, each one a painful reminder of why I needed to cut him out of my life once and for all. Soon, my uncle came back home. Well, well, if it isn't the little boy who thinks he's a man," he slurred, his words dripping with contempt. I squared my shoulders, refusing to let his taunts weaken my resolve. "I'm done, Uncle," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear bubbling within me. "I'm done letting you control me." He laughed, a hollowed sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Control you?" he scoffed. "You'll always be mine, Alex, no matter how hard you try to run." Anger surged through me. "Not anymore," I shot back. "I'm cutting you out of my life for good." My uncle's eyes narrowed as he moved towards me, his movements unsteady from the alcohol. "You ungrateful brat," he spat, reaching out as if to grab me. I stepped back out of his reach. "Stay away from me," I warned, my voice trembling with newfound strength. "If you ever come near me again, I'll call the police." For a moment, he seemed taken aback by my defiance. Then, his face twisted into a mask of rage. "You'll regret this, Alex," he snarled, his voice barely more than a growl. "You'll come crawling back to me." Meanwhile, Jamie was back in the cafe where we decided to meet, but clearly, I was late. Jamie came to me. I could see worry etched on his face, panting. He came close to my house, standing on my street, clearly shocked by the police and the commotion outside my house. My uncle stood on the sidewalk, handcuffed and surrounded by officers. He was shouting, calling me all sorts of names, his face twisted with fury and humiliation. For the first time in my life, I looked at him without fear. Jamie made his way to me and reached for my hand, his touch grounding me in the midst of chaos. "What's going on, Alex?" he asked softly, concern etched in his features. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The police are taking him away," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He was causing trouble, shouting at me, trying to hit me." Jamie's grip tightened on my hand, offering silent support. I glanced at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," I said, my voice filled with quiet resolve. Jamie smiled back, relief and pride shining in his eyes. My past no longer held power over me. I had reclaimed my life, with Jamie by my side. As the police escorted my uncle away, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The chapter of my life filled with fear and abuse was finally coming to an end. And as I stood there, hand in hand with Jamie, I knew that our love was stronger than any darkness that had tried to tear us apart. We walked away from the scene, leaving my uncle behind us. In that moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. With Jamie's love and support, I knew we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The end. Do you believe love can conquer anything? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.